And let's move into the first order of business. Are there any additions to the agenda that was circulated by the deputy clerk? Seeing none. Approval of the agenda. Someone care to move? Pat McCourt, seconded by John. All in favor? Thank you. That motion's carried. So the next item of business on that agenda is a direct declaration of pecuniary interest. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? The matters before us at this meeting. Seeing none, we'll move on to presentations. We have no scheduled presentations. We had discussed at the last meeting having some of the township key staff members involved, and the deputy clerk and I discussed it last week, and we think next month, it looked like this was going to be a full agenda this month. So next month, the plan will be to invite at least one of the key officials, depending on their scheduling, and we'll make that one of the priorities of next month's meeting. Approval of the item number 6 on our agenda today, approval of the previous meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to consider the minutes from the last meeting? Anyone like to care to move adoption of those minutes? Pat McCourt again. Shannon second. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That motion's carried. All right, moving quickly through all of the stuff of more about bookkeeping, bureaucratic side. We'll get into the meat of the meetings. So business arising from the previous meeting. As you recall, we ran long last month, and we had only had a chance to discuss 3 of the recommendations that this committee had made to council. And so we'd like to carry on that discussion here today. And I think both Pat McCourt and the deputy clerk were keen to report back on the consideration of the first 3 recommendations that we had made. So perhaps that would be a good place to start, to set off our discussion for the subsequent recommendations. Who would like to deal with that? Pat, would you like to?
Yeah, Emily can add everything that I forget, because I thought I had it all, and now I'm thinking, I'm sure there's stuff we're forgetting. We took the recommendations forward. The CAO is looking, is talking with the other municipalities, just in terms generally of how to make sure that we can keep having support for the committee, so that because we're saying if that position is actually lost, it's going to cause a big gap for us. So that's one thing out of the way. But the things that were specific to the township, like the anti-idling and the composting, the looking after those things at the township level, because of and including the making it part of our checklist for when we have a new thing come forward. We've asked for the CAO to bring us, or staff to bring us, a report on the impacts of how we go about doing this and what we can get done quickly. So I believe that will be coming next month, though I don't know that that is a guaranteed thing, but that was the impression I got. Emily, was the time actually stated?
I just have submitted back to council.
Yeah, so with the point that we made was that we're trying to get things moving forward. So I'm assuming that it will come in June. If it doesn't, I will remind them so that we can get it done for the next meeting. Did I forget anything, Emily?
Oh, you covered it.
Thank you.
Well, those were the 3. Okay. Perhaps as we to facilitate this ongoing discussion, Madam Deputy Clerk, do you have a page handy that shows the recommendations that are posted on the screen? The original recommendations from how we had prioritized them.
I can get them. One moment. Okay. So we have the recommendations here, and please bear with the formatting. That is something we're working with our meeting manager software application with, to just make things a little more streamlined and cleaned up. So the recommendations that were made.
Oh, forgive me,
Oh.
Emily. I meant the balance of the ones we hadn't discussed.
Oh, for the greenhouse gas report.
Yes. No, I think this, unless anybody in the committee has any further questions about Pat's report to us, I think we're very grateful for the council's consideration and the fact that you'll be reporting back on the recommendation about the significance of adding an environmental consideration to future policies and programs. Shannon?
I just had a question if the document from Windsor, the guidance document that Judy provided us with, was included, like was provided to the CAO or the staff as a sort of, template, or
That sorry, that did not go forward as I'm getting feedback. Bear with me.
is that better? My sound was weird on my side. It could have been me.
Fingers crossed this time.
Yep, that's good.
Okay, there we go. Okay. Sorry, through you, Chair. The report from Windsor did not go to council as part of the recommendation. So that was just, that'll be kept in-house as just sort of an example for staff to draw on as if we decide, if council decides we should move forward on any of this when we develop the recommendations.
Any further questions? Seeing none. So again, do we have the balance of the original committee recommendations that might be presented in the graphic format? Let's refresh all of our, well, at least my failing memory. I can't speak for the mental acuity of the other folks on the call. There we go. Okay, so number 4, let's dig right into this. We'll keep one eye on the clock. Again, the deputy clerk and I questioned whether we could get through them all, given the length of time we spent debating the other items last month and the other items we have on the agenda. But this is one of our top priorities. So I'd like to see us get as many of these done this month as we can. So let's launch right into it. Recommendation number 4. So replacing all fleet light vehicles with electric pickups as they become available. Would anyone like to speak to that and either in favor, opposed, change their priorities in consideration of some of the other options? One challenge by having that up there is I won't see hands. There we go, Faye. Don't hear you though, Faye. Sounds.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I am so sorry. I just got on the meeting. I don't know what happened, but I'm just on it now. So if you wouldn't mind, please just giving me a brief summary of what the issue is, very brief.
We've done nothing more than recap what happened last month, had the report back on the first 3 recommendations. And basically the gist of that is that council has now received them. They'll report back next month.
Okay, great. So your question now is do we want to change our priorities, I think?
No, not exclusively that, but remember our process last month. We're now at the stage of actually making recommendations to council. And the question becomes, do we still like the wording? Are we comfortable with the priorities? Or if we're happy, I mean, we could race through the whole thing. If we all like everything that's on there, we can simply couch these each in the appropriate language for council's consideration and move on to other business. But I do think this is our sort of last kick at the cat before we reach the stage of recommendation to council. So if anyone has any thoughts about each of these things as we go through. Pat? Oh, you're muted there, Pat.
think that's the sentence of the century, or at least
Indeed,
COVID.
indeed.
My only question is the priority ranking on here in terms of the reality of it being the next step, or like in terms of the light trucks, for example. We know that that's a budget consideration. We know that that's not something that's going to happen right away. Are we planning on doing the wording as such that we are aware of this being a bigger ticket item? However, we do think it should have a high priority, or are we trying to make this in a list of the order that we are hoping that we can get things completed?
Well, to be honest with you, I think that's exactly the sort of input we need before we come to a conclusion. Personally, I look at that and say, it's great to talk about having the vehicles, but wouldn't it be more important to have the infrastructure in place before you get the vehicles? So that's just my consideration. If we were talking about chicken and egg type capital considerations, it seems to me you have to have the recharging station before it's practical to change your fleet over. So that could be part of the verbiage. When such infrastructure exists to accommodate the change, that council consider the replacement of all fleet light vehicles with electric pickups as they become available over the next 5 to 10 years, might be the sort of motion that we take forward. John?
Yeah, so I don't think we need to say 5 to 10 years. I think we need to say that every time we go to tender to replace a pickup truck, that we provisionally ask for an electric one as an option. In other words, you know, you got to buy a new pickup truck this year. In the spec, you write that the provisionally the vehicle would be all electric, and whether it becomes affordable for the town at that time, then the council will make that decision. And the whole business of infrastructure, like these things, would only, you know, drive around in 99% of the time inside the township, and so charging them back at their home base is probably not a big issue. So anyway, that's how I see it. That we should ask that when you go to tender for a light duty truck, that you provisionally ask for an electric one as an option. Because they're starting to show signs in the next couple of years that we're going to start seeing these trucks. And whether they'll work for what the town needs, because I don't think we have a lot of light duties. We have like 3/4 and 1 tons, because sometimes we put snow plows on them and things like that. Those, I don't know that those trucks will be available soon. True.
Ed? Pat?
Just because I like the idea of doing it that way, even if it's asking for a costing for both, so that as we see that gap closing, we can decide, you know what, they're close enough now that it makes sense for us to go with the electric. And if it's worded that way, I think that not just this council, but councils as a whole will be thinking more again in terms of, yes, we know we need to get there. It's always, I'm going to say in our face, but in a positive way, rather than a, you need to do this now way, which is important if you want the buy-in.
Okay, thank you. Shannon?
I also wonder, is it possible, Pat, you would know maybe, or Emily, is it possible to also have them consider in the costing the fuel savings cost, that like when factoring in whether the township can afford to make the switch over, because it would be significant. Obviously, the amount of electricity you pay versus the amount you pay in fuel is quite a big difference.
If I may, I would think that assuming that we're able to go forward with having the environmental impacts on everything that comes forward, that'll all roll in together, and that cost savings would be something that would be considered in the process. And if it looks like it's not, I'm sure that we can get it there.
Okay, any other points? Faye,
There's a local electric vehicle organization, and one of the main experts that's involved with that is a retired professor from one of the colleges. And he has a whole presentation on electric vehicles, costing it out, and has done the whole thing. So he certainly would be able to provide a presentation to council and staff on it. And it's not necessarily now, but at some point in the future. They're trying to get the, sort of a test them out type of thing, which is probably premature right now in terms of trucks, but that's coming down the road. So there's a lot of resources, excellent resources locally on this issue that would be very helpful for council and for staff.
thank you. Pat?
If I may once more, I think as we get established more as a committee, one of the things that we should consider is different areas that maybe like once a year we make a presentation to council just in general about these are why these things are important. Look how much they've found now, and just do a committee as a whole presentation and say these are why we're pushing for these things to happen. These are the changes that people are finding are being made. More as an overview, because much as we want us thinking about it each time something comes up, sometimes the bigger picture is actually useful to have in people's head, because then they start thinking, oh, I can dig away at this corner and this corner.
Oh, great idea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? And I have one comment I'd like to make. Seeing none. I actually think we might be setting our sights a little low, because as the technology moves forward, I don't think, to Pat's immediate preceding point, I don't think we want to be continuing to spend our each month's meeting saying, hey, look, this manufacturer now has this new product in an electric or renewable energy fuel version. So I would suggest we might want to broaden the scope of this recommendation and simply say replace all fleet vehicles, take the light out, with electric, and I'm going to suggest we add or hydrogen variant as they become available or commercially competitive, which covers off the fact that something might be available, but if it's 5 times the price, I think we have to respect the fact that council has to allow capital considerations to be part of their decision making. But if we were to make it clear that this committee recommends that all other things considered, speaking to Shannon's point, not just the front end cost, but the ongoing operating savings, that from this point on, electric or hydrogen variants of those vehicles should be the priority. Because right now, it is cost competitive to buy a Zamboni fueled by hydrogen or a forklift truck fueled by hydrogen. There are locomotives fueled by hydrogen and heavy transport trucks. So while electric seems to be moving up from the bottom, hydrogen is filling in some of the stuff from the top. And who knows, 5 years from now, hydrogen may also be competitive in the light vehicles and cars. And I just don't think we should constrain council to only look at one clean energy option if in fact technology takes us to a place where another equally green option is a better price, better operating considerations for the council. So I don't know whether that would pass muster with you folks.
No, I would support that. That's good.
Thank you. So can I take a stab at putting that into wording that the committee recommends that the council develop a policy to replace all fleet vehicles with electric or hydrogen variants as they become available and commercially competitive.
Right.
Yes, Pat?
I think you should specify in that considering also the long-term savings, like we were saying with Shannon's suggestion.
Oh, okay, that's what I was hoping to cover by commercially competitive.
I don't know. I don't know if they'd automatically go there. Is all. They still make commercial. Do based pricing.
Okay, how about, okay, instead of commercial, financial competitiveness, including consideration of operational savings?
Yeah.
Did that
I-
cover it for you?
Yeah.
Okay, super. Judy?
I just thought that maybe we could also express the point that Pat made, that with each new purchase, that this be a consideration. Otherwise, it might be sort of a general rule that maybe isn't applied specifically. But I may be wrong. Pat, what do you think?
I think with respect, Judy, I think the motion as I phrased it, at least my expectation is that would then be doing exactly what you just suggested, that each time you buy something,
Okay,
you will consider that. So that's why I say develop a policy to replace all fleet vehicles with electric or hydrogen variants. The priority be given to replacing all fleet vehicles with electric or hydrogen variants as they become available and financially competitive, including consideration for operational savings.
Okay.
Anyone got anything to add to that? Okay.
I'm a little bit uncomfortable with competitive. I'm wondering if we
No.
could say,
Oh,
sorry.
sorry,
competitive.
financially competitive? Okay.
Yes, I'm just wondering if we could say something like reasonable, because typically you're going to be spending more upfront. But not only you save money with gasoline, but also hugely with maintenance, particularly with vehicles. So I just want to give the opportunity, a greater opportunity for the purchase of, say, the electric one, just because it may not be competitive on the front end, you know.
No, but that's why I say including operational savings.
Okay. Okay.
So again, I'm happy to take any alternative wording, but my proposal to you is that we say you have to look at whether it's competitive, but as part of looking at that competitiveness, you have to factor in operational savings.
Okay.
So
All right.
front end would be higher, you're right, but operational savings would be lower. Where is the balancing point? What's the tipping point? Is your payback 1 year, 2 years, 20 years? If it's 20 years, then it's not feasible. If it's 6 months, fantastic. They'd be crazy not to incur the higher front end. Pat?
I like the wording the way you originally put it, partly because if we start to get too like detailed in the wording, it may end up backfiring on us. Again, I think that right now it very much says this is what you need to look at. You need to not just compare price, but compare the longer term savings. And a competitive just makes that it stays council decision without it feeling like, no, we have to be moving that way, even though we want to be moving that way. I'm not sure if I'm saying it clearly, but how it's said can have as big an impact as what we're wanting. And I like the wording we have right now.
Okay, thank you, Pat. And listen, again, we've said it before, but we have to be sensitive to the fact that we are an advisory committee. We have to respect the fact that the ultimate say in all these things is council's, but we need to provide them with as much ammunition as possible to fight this good fight. And I think respecting what Pat has just said, allowing them to at least be able to put their stamp on the final decision making, but knowing that this committee that they've established has laid out a very clear direction. So are there any other thoughts about the wording of the motion as expressed? I shouldn't actually make that motion. If somebody wants to move, Pat will move it. Would anybody care to be the seconder? Oh, sorry, Emily has a comment.
Sorry, I just want to read it back to make sure I got it with all the wordsmithing. So I have that council develop a policy to replace all fleet vehicles with electric or hybrid or hydrogen options as they become available and financially competitive, including operational savings. Is that?
Yep, that's
Okay.
perfect. Thank you. I'm sorry, and forgive me because I should have reread it. So who, if anyone, was interested in seconding that motion? Looking for hands. Oh, John, thank you very much. All in favor? Contrary, if any? That motion is carried. Thank you, folks. All right, let's move on to the next one. Support the energy retrofit of homes of residents with energy poverty as part of the adorable or the affordable, as we see fit, housing strategy. Maybe it was supposed to be adorable. Yes, Pat.
I just want to comment on that. Further in our agenda is I think it's the TD grant. That's 5,000.
Right.
Is that $5,000? Part of this, to my mind, would be things like us having that grant on our website and promoting it so that people know that there is money out there. I don't know that separately or that specifically goes in our comment for this, this recommendation, but there's a definite connection right now with that new money coming out.
Well, there's that. And of course, the federal government just announced their support for clean energy.
That's actually the one I'm in.
Oh, okay.
Good.
Absolutely. I think we said at one of the earlier meetings that communicating programs that are in place by other bodies is just as important as anything we may develop as a homegrown solution. And clearly, if another level of government has money sitting on the table right now, we need to do our best to make sure that all of our neighbors are aware of this. And so to the extent that we can coordinate and assist the council and the deputy clerk in communicating that and providing suggestions as to where that can be done, newsletters, the signboard out front, or the two signboards, that might very well be additional verbiage you want to add to a recommendation in this area. Sorry, John, did I see your hand up?
Yeah, just wanted to add Facebook to that list of
Absolutely.
places to support that.
Okay. Judy?
In terms of that $5,000 grant, I went looking for the conditions on it because usually you have to spend a certain amount to get a certain amount, maybe to get the maximum, but I don't know. Has anybody seen the conditions on this? Is it something you can get as a grant and then spend it to your heart's content on the improvements to efficiency, or do you have to spend more and then you get a certain percentage each time until to a maximum of a $5,000 grant? Has anybody seen the details yet? Oh, good.
No.
Yeah, just a comment. I have not actually, Judy, but I was looking for the same thing, and everything that I've seen so far, which is not the official paperwork, it sounds like you may have to get it first and then get the money back. But it sounds like it's a straight up grant. It doesn't sound like it's a 50-50 or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I'm waiting to see what actually comes out from the government, and that I've not been able to find yet.
That is
Okay.
my understanding as well. And unlike the previous incarnation of this plan, you will also get up to $600 back for the home appraisal, which you have to do as a condition. So that was one absolute condition. You have to do a before and after appraisal.
Right.
And that can be pricey, but this new program does have provision to repay you $600, which might cover the whole thing, depending on how appraisers set their price schedule. Judy?
And in terms of people who are facing energy poverty, which is lower in Hamilton Township than in all the other municipalities, but it's still in the 20% range. Those folks probably will not take advantage of the program if they have to put the money if they have to pay in advance and then get reimbursed. So over time, there's going to be a need for some sort of program that subsidizes this kind of help for the local community. And it can be part of the affordable housing strategy that Hamilton Township develops in line with the county affordable housing strategy, which each municipality has to adopt some version that's in line with that affordable housing strategy. And there's usually some grant money provided by the municipality to assist. So this is it is a long-term issue, and we're working out the details in the county, as well as with that FCM grant I mentioned earlier, which Coburg applied for and received recently. That will allow Coburg to figure out the feasibility of how to fund grants and programs to retrofit the houses of people who have energy poverty, who don't normally do retrofits or renovations of their buildings. So that'll be an ongoing development that'll need to be established, but there'll be some work done starting this year on what sources of funding there are and how to set it up. That will be useful in a year or two to Hamilton Township. So hopefully we can revisit this in a year to see how we can help those who may not take advantage of the federal grant.
All right, so are there any other thoughts that differ from Judy's in terms of this being something that's probably longer term that we circle back around to as the county and the township works to develop and flesh out their affordable housing plan? Sorry, Shan, just sign in.
This isn't disagreeing with Judy at all, but I did notice that there is rolling out this summer a federal interest-free loan program that it says is will specifically help lower income people access these grants. So sort of like what you're talking about, but there's a $40,000 interest-free loan program coming on board. So that your information about how that helps lower income people is something, again, that could be part of our communication strategy about these things, but I don't disagree with anything else you said. I'm just adding that information.
Thanks.
Well, that would certainly change the perspective if such a grant program existed. John?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something to it is I think, and maybe this is something Emily could do for us, is all of the grants that are available for energy related things, like even the electric car thing and stuff like that, you should be something that is on the website so that Hamilton Township people can access them. And I don't even know what is available. There could be a whole bunch of provincial ones, although with the Rob Ford government, I doubt that. but there's federal ones and stuff that we probably don't even know about. So we need to search them out and have them available as a link on the website. So, and that's just taking away a bit from where we are in the agenda right now, but I think it's important that we do that.
I agree, John. Thank you. Pat, your hand is up.
I agree with John that it's a bit of a side trip. I would say, I think that if we see information about grants, we can forward it to Emily for her to see whether it fits for her on the website. But I don't think that we can ask Emily to search for grants for us, because I have a feeling that would be fairly time consuming.
Okay.
Perhaps given Judy's position, if she's aware of a summary of that, I don't disagree with Pat. And again, looking at our place in the pecking order, and we shouldn't be imposing, we should be helping. I agree with your point, John. I just think that if the work's already been done somewhere else, let's funnel that through to Emily.
Sure.
And we can, if you want to make that a motion, that a summary of grants related to the work of the committee promoting energy efficiency and clean energy use, that the township maintain a listing of available grants and subsidies to support its residents.
Okay, but I didn't want to change the emphasis on your agenda going
Oh,
forward.
but John, the agenda is I mean, these recommendations,
Yeah.
that's precisely why we're having the discussion. If it flows in a different direction, great,
Right.
let's do that. And if everyone's comfortable with what John has suggested here, phrased as the motion or something similar
Sure.
I've just described.
Okay. So I would make a motion that the township maintain a list of, maintain and publish a list of government, of grants from other government agencies, both federal and provincially. How does that sound?
Would you accept as a friendly amendment on the website as where it's published, and grants and subsidies?
Right. I would accept any amendment.
I see Pat's hand was up first, then Fay. Pat?
I don't know if I'm supposed to second for this. Oops, I don't know if I'm supposed to second for discussion purposes, but my question, I think, is that maybe this Emily should just have a chance to say how feasible it is to maintain the list. Normally when she posts on Facebook, it's like it's a one-off. It gets posted and it's there and people can go back and see it. I don't know what's involved in maintaining a list that people can get at regularly, so I'm not saying it is or isn't something that's within what Emily can do, but we should maybe ask Emily if it's a list that can be regularly gone back to. Is that more difficult for it to be done?
Madam Deputy Clerk, care to offer your thoughts on that?
Of course. The maintenance side of it for publishing on a website and maintaining that list to ensure information accuracy is a very time consuming and very burdensome. It would become a full-time job in order to make sure that becomes consistently accurate and up-to-date information available for our residents. It may be of more interest and more beneficial from the committee's perspective in terms of doing the promotions to push it through our Facebook page, which would be us then distributing the information in lifetime, but requires sort of a one-click approach as opposed to a sort of a full-time dedication to maintaining and researching and making sure that something that we're not advertising something that closed 6 months ago. So whereas if it's Facebook, it's an automatic push out to all of our followers to that direct link. It would be different if it was subsidies that we are offering in-house. So it's a Hamilton Township subsidy, an internal program. But when you're being asked to then manage and promote third-party programming, it does get very, very labor intensive.
Okay, Fay, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just saying that most of these grants are going to be coming from the feds or the province, and we could ask that both our MP and MPP's offices send us on a regular basis or send the township those grants as they come out. And then as soon as they're received, then they can be pushed onto the onto Facebook. And they would maybe the only thing we have to add to it is the deadline, because that's that's probably good. And also both of those offices provide assistance. I understand, and when you're applying for grants, if you have difficulty, etc. So if we put that in on Facebook and do it, I would say probably quarterly. I mean, do it as they come out, and then maybe just update it quarterly, because usually they last for a number of months. Then that's great. I think this is excellent. And then that can be part of what we report to council on an annual basis, because I really like that suggestion that Pat made. But the other comment I have is, so this is basically all we can do until we hear back from Judy and find out specifically what the county, or for example, Cobourg, is doing in terms of those kinds of additional assistance, we basically, I don't know if we can do anything further, other than provide that information.
Yeah.
Am I right with that?
Mhm.
No, excellent comments, all. Thank you. So Shannon?
Yes, sorry. I was also thinking an alternative for the website, because I can see definitely both arguments, and I think a landing place on the website where people know they could always go back to is helpful. But what if we just had links to the general, like the federal government has a page that lists their environmental
Right.
grants, and so does the provincial government. So we could even just link to those and they'll be updating them. And then if the Facebook, if it made sense to post specific initiatives as they're coming, and you're right, they pass by, and then you don't have to worry about updating that. That might be a simpler way to do the website piece if possible.
Okay, so we're back to John, whose motion is on the floor right now. To incorporate, if you think it's appropriate, or it can always be a second motion, Shannon's suggestion that the township have a reference or a link to provincial and federal, what would we call it? If a summary page exists for federal and provincial programs, that the township website provide a link to those pages. And in addition, as new programs for grants or subsidies are announced, that the township Facebook account be used to publicize those programs. Does that incorporate what you want, John, and what you're suggesting, Shannon?
Yeah, I think it's just important that somehow that information is available to the ratepayers of the township.
Right.
So however we think it's feasible to do it, given the fact that we don't want to burden Emily or any of the staff too much, but I think we still need to get it out there. So I don't know where we are with the wording now. But
well, you can make it even less specific than I've just suggested.
No,
you can
no,
say as new programs are developed, the township utilize either its Facebook page or its website as it deems most appropriate to
Sure.
communicate those programs.
okay,
Does that give?
I think
is that-
that covers it. Yeah.
If the deputy clerk think that gives her colleagues greater flexibility, then. But I agree with your point, John. I think it is important that we do our best to share this news as broadly as we can.
Right.
Do we have a seconder to that motion? Faye, your hand was up first. All in favor? Contrary of any? Carried. Thank you. All right, so let's go back, but I am sensitive to the time here and just look, shall we try and polish off one more and then do the rest of our agenda? We can do a batch of 3 or 4 of these each meeting. Build and retrofit all new housing to the passive house standard by 2030. Anyone have any thoughts on that? Comments they'd like to add? Faye?
I'm assuming this is a property, what is it, bylaws or whatever, property standards or bylaws that we would have to have passed in our township?
Yes.
Okay, and that's a pretty significant, comprehensive endeavor, I guess, to get to that point.
Yeah.
And I don't understand how that happens, the process. So I think we absolutely should be doing this, but maybe that's going to be a topic on its own.
It certainly is a significant one, and different municipalities have pursued it in different ways. At its core, and whether we want to link it to a particular standard, in this case, the passive house standard, or we want to say something that ensures we stay at the cutting edge by saying the highest and best use of energy efficiency technology must be incorporated in any in the planning bylaws of the township, particularly for new build. I personally, and I'll shut up and let folks comment, but I see a big difference between the standard you set for anybody that wants to come in and build something from today onwards to the standard we recommend that existing homeowners pursue. The township has the absolute right on the first hand to do whatever they want. And if they want to say insulation 3 times the current Ontario building code, they can do that. If they say it's illegal to have water heaters and you must have inline heaters, they can do that today. And as long as it's applied consistently, they won't lose at LPAT. This will be an enforceable part of any building permit granted in the township. So the question really becomes, how far down that road of leadership and energy efficiency perfection are we willing to recommend the township council to go? Looking back and forth, Pat? I figured you'd probably be the first jump in on this one.
Yeah. When I read this originally, my first problem was the word retrofit for exactly the reasons you were saying. I don't want to discourage people from making improvements and then have them come in for something that's retrofit that needs a permit and then be told, well, you need to really be doing this and this as well. Like, I think that I'd rather have them get something done than have to feel like, oh, I can't do this now because I can't afford to do this big thing. And, I was going to get I know you don't have to get a permit for a water heater, but for whatever reason, I just think that that's way too complicated. I was the one who said this might be a good topic for us to actually have one of the building guys come in and talk to us about sort of what will and won't work. I also worry in terms of new builds. One of the things that we're talking about is secondary housing so that people can have like a small accessory house for either for rental or for their kids or whoever. And I don't know, because I have no idea of the difference in cost, if those secondary units, which we're starting to encourage because of the affordable housing and such, might end up not happening if we're saying, okay, you have to build to the standard. So I don't know where the balance is. And until I have more information, I don't feel really comfortable trying to figure out where this fits in a plan.
Okay, so your suggestion would be we deferred consideration to this one until we've had a chance to hear from one of the building inspectors and get their input?
I think that'd be a good start. And I like I said, I don't know that you can convince me that retrofit is a word we want in to start with right now anyway. I think we have to start a bit smaller.
Yeah.
Or 2 separate motions. Judy?
Yes, retrofit shouldn't be in there. This is, actually, this is an interesting way to have made the report recommendation. It's basically talking about the rigor of the passive house standard, and that by the time it's 2030, that should be the new standard. Because just about everything else, you can say we want to attain better, more improved efficiencies, but unless you've got something to work against and to be able to measure, if you can't measure it, it's if you just say I added this amount of extra insulation and I improved the windows and sealed leaks and so on, even with an audit before and after, you're not really achieving what is possible, and it's very hard to say. Well, that's more for a retrofit if you're doing an audit before and after, but a new build, you need to set some sort of standard. And the only standard out there that is an actual energy standard is the passive house standard. So it's a
Well, Judy, with respect, there's LEED. There are other
no,
standards
but
out there.
LEED, it doesn't set a standard. It gives
Silver,
you
gold?
points. It gives you points for doing environmental things you could do. You could put in a permeable driveway, a bike stand, or a green roof. But well, green roof is a bit of an energy efficient component, but you can achieve green, a standard of LEED Gold without doing hardly anything, if and maybe even nothing on energy. It's too broad. So if you want to really address climate change, you have to do it in a way that's going to reduce the fossil fuel use. But
Judy, just in the interest of time, are you disagreeing that we need to separate retrofit from build in this one?
well, I think what this point is that we need to adopt rigor for both new builds and retrofits. But it's missing a whole other component, which is that we have to adopt green development standards, which is a stepped program that brings you up to passive house standard by 2030. I think I submitted information about Whitby, Ontario, which has adopted this approach. So you only go so far every 2 years until you reach the sort of the pinnacle of passive house that you can turn into a net zero house. Any additional energy used in the house can be offset by solar or maybe wind, but mostly rooftop solar. But out in the country, it might be something, maybe a small wind generator too. But there really should be, and I'm sorry I didn't notice this sooner, but there should be another recommendation for green development standards for new builds, which addresses a whole array of things. But this is more putting rigor in the new builds and retrofits, that you're going to do everything you can to make the house as energy efficient, which makes it low cost to operate, like an electric vehicle in a way, but also keeps the house in good shape for the future weather extremes we're going to face. So it's not going to heat up or cool down as fast if the power goes out. And it's going to provide a more comfortable building that is cheaper to operate over time. But it does require that there be improvements in the labor market, that the construction crews know better what they're doing in terms of how to make a house tight and how to use the new technologies, the air-to-air heat exchange unit for fresh ventilation, and heat pumps to replace gas furnaces. But thanks, I'm sorry I didn't notice quite how this was worded before. My apologies.
Okay, so if there's no other contrary opinion, I think we, in deference to Pat's suggestion, this is one we probably should postpone for a meeting at which we can get input from the building department, and we can explore further. And perhaps between now and then, the committee members can give consideration to the separation, potential separation of this into at least two different clauses, recognizing the council's ability to move as fast as they want for energy efficiency standards for new construction. while retrofits are decisions made by homeowners themselves in many cases. So if there's no disagreement with that, might I suggest, Madam Deputy Clerk, we put an end to our discussion of these recommendations and move on to the other items on our agenda this month, just so we don't keep bouncing everything back in perpetuity.
Sure, we can. I would recommend that you do a motion to revisit the remaining, where are we at here? We're on 6. So the remaining 9, just to get them on the agenda.
Sure.
For next meeting.
Somebody care to make that motion? Oh, wait. Pat, thank you. Seconded by Shannon. All in favor? Contrary of any? That motion's carried. Thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk.
Sorry, could I just ask, is it possible to make sure that we include that green development standards piece that Judy was just talking about, so that we don't forget about that next time we return to this passive housing conversation?
Sure, although it will be on the floor again, and all committee members would be entitled to. But between now and then, if someone wants to send any thoughts in, strictly speaking, the compendium of all of our recommendations is the entity. We could make other motions to start changing all of that, but I think you're getting into an awful lot of detail that may not be necessary, because again, we can have this discussion again, or a more fulsome one, once this is brought back at the subsequent meeting.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Oh, maybe I misunderstood. Are you suggesting that 6 should be part of what we're? Forgive me. I understand what you're saying now. That rather than just the other 9, that 6 be brought back as well.
Well, we do need to return to it, but I was also just, maybe it's just me, the green development standard phrasing I thought was important, because Judy suggested that's talking about the tiered approach to passive
Right,
housing.
but I think that needs to be part of the rediscussion, which then would
Okay.
become a motion. So would the mover and seconder be comfortable with, instead of the last 9, that motion say the last 10? Any disagreement with that? Or we can put a new vote if you do. I think, Pat, you moved it, did you? Or you're comfortable with that? Okay, so if that last motion can just, forgive me, I should have cut that too. So anything from number 6 onwards will be part of our discussion next month. All right, on with the other agenda items. Yes, Ben?
Oh, if we could just stop back for a second, could we ask either somebody on the committee or somebody or staff to contact the MP's office and the MPP's office and ask them to forward directly to whoever, be it the committee or staff, all grants and subsidies that could come forward that we were talking about before for housing,
If you'd like to make that a motion, then it is totally in order. So if you want to move that and somebody seconds that the staff contact the offices of the local MP and MPP to request on an ongoing basis their assistance in publicizing any grant and subsidy programs they may develop related to energy efficiency and clean energy.
And forward that to the township offices.
Yeah, no, as I say, staff do, yes, the staff be asked to get it.
Yes, I would make that motion. Thank you.
Okay, seconder, if any. John, your hand is up first. All in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you. All right, now we can go on to the other agenda items. Got mine up somewhere here. Let's see. So, we had 7.2, Madam Deputy Clerk, who was the GHG recommendations ranking report. We've covered that, so that's been dealt with. Agenda item 7.3, last month's 7.2. FCM funding update. Was that something you were going to provide, or?
Yeah, so through the committee at the, I think it was April 26th. So there was an update on the FCM funding, but the committee had asked that we gather information on any of the green energy grants that we've applied for in the past. So I was able to reach out to our finance team. And we did, we looked in the last 5 years. We did at one point have a green team, which was set up to sort of look at environmental different grants and energy efficiencies within our buildings. But that has since just sort of went by the wayside. And the finance team was able to look, and we confirmed that we have not received any grants in relation to what the committee had asked for.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure there's any questions that could arise from that, but if anyone has anything. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item, 7.4, the electric vehicle charger update. Emily, I think you had some comments, or would you prefer if Judy offered some thoughts?
Well, this I do believe was coming from our CAO. So, and Councillor McCourt, please feel free to jump in on this one with me as well. So we had originally applied for the installation of several EV chargers to be placed throughout the township as part of a program with, I believe it was Hydro One and OPG. So they've since merged together to create its own separate standalone program to help oversee the installation of these chargers. When we originally applied for the to be part of the program, we were given a certain set of pricing, and that has since changed. So we're sort of at a bit of a standstill there in terms of how we'd like to proceed since the original quote came through.
Okay, thank you. Judy?
Yes, I had been in touch afterwards with the IV network after the actual sites were determined. One of them didn't have an electric panel, and so that was going to be more expensive. And there were 3 sites, I think, Emily, is that correct? 3 sites or 3 chargers? I'm a little sketchy if it was 3 or 4, but if you might remember.
I can confirm three for sure. One was the Baltimore Rec Center, the other was the Township Municipal Office in Camborne, and the third, I believe, was initially the Bewdley Recreation Center.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure which one didn't have an electric panel, but in the case of them being standalone chargers versus units that had double charging capability, that's more expensive to set up. The original estimate was between $1,000 and $2,000, and Hamilton's came out at like $3,500. It was the highest out of 99. Well, there were 99 chargers in this collective offering that went to the federal government from the IV network. And Hamilton townships were the highest because of some of these issues. But they did come back. The IV network did come back and suggested an alternative that would have put the price at $1,600 per charging connector per year, which was within the reference of the original proposal. And but they haven't heard back from Hamilton Township on that possibility. If Hamilton Township does go along with this process, This is a turnkey process that's managed by the Ivy network. And it saves staff time from having to figure out how to set these systems up. And it's paid for over 10 years instead of in an upfront larger amount to install the charger. And it also provides a $5,000 grant per connector. So that would have been $15,000 off of the price. So I had recommended this approach to the 7 municipalities in Northumberland. And I would have had to collect 20 chargers to even apply. And it's a very complicated application. But by virtue of having the Ivy network do it, we originally had 33 chargers in 5 municipalities that were going forward. And that was 33 of 99 so we were about a third of the group that the Ivy network was putting forward. So if it doesn't go forward this year, the $15,000, the grant is lost to us. And Hamilton Township would have to, when they're ready to start electric vehicle infrastructure in the community, they would have to figure it out themselves on how to do it, or perhaps find another company to do it. I thought the Ivy network was fairly secure because it's Hydro One and then the OPG, but it also means if people are out for a Sunday drive or from Toronto coming through, they may not visit this area if there's no infrastructure for tourists. There's examples in Cobourg where people have called the town up to see if they had electric vehicle charging before the Waterfront Festival. So there is a case to be made if you want people to visit, and if you want people to understand that electric vehicles are here now and available now, your own residents. It's good to have a few examples in your community. So right now, all I know is that the status of it is in limbo, but if it's going ahead, it has to go ahead this year, or else the grant is lost. So it works out to $1,600 per connector instead of the $3,600 per connector. But that would mean that one of them was a double unit at, I guess, the most appropriate place. And there may be better places, perhaps. It's possible that this committee might want to suggest some. And Steve had suggested some locations, perhaps at Gore's Landing or Rice Lake, Bewdley, or Roseneath, but and perhaps having some signage around the community to show where there is a charging station. So I guess if the committee considers this something to encourage the council to go forward with in a revised form, then that's the reason I've brought it forward to the committee.
Okay. Faye?
I think this is definitely something that our township should be doing. And I'm just not clear about process that's happened so far. So are you saying, Judy, that you are waiting for Hamilton Township to get back to you in terms of using this opportunity with the Ivy Network?
From what I understand, like originally Hamilton Township agreed in principle, but then once the actual fine calculations for the estimate of what it was going to cost based on the locations that were picked, they then told the Ivy Network that they weren't going to go ahead with it. But then the Ivy Network gave them a different option, which was cheaper by half. And they didn't hear back from Hamilton Township on whether they wanted to, whether Hamilton Township wanted to do that. There's also the possibility of paying for it next year, as long as it's installed this year, that the Ivy Network is willing to do.
Mhm. Okay, so there's basically two things didn't happen here. One, when the first option was too expensive, nobody came forward and said, hey, what about Gore's Landing or Bewdley? In other words, cheaper locations. And then the second thing is that they're still waiting to hear back even when they reduce the price significantly. So
that's true, but it's not me they talked to. It was the person, the representative of the Ivy Network. I was in touch with him, and
okay.
he said that no, he hadn't heard back.
Okay, so I think this is something that it might be very worthwhile lighting a bit of a fire under the people who have to get back. And I think the proposal for Gore's Landing and Bewdley, you know, as alternate sites, I mean, you know, where are people coming to and where we want them to be? I mean, you know, that there's so many places it could be in our township, but I think those are excellent ideas. So I think we should have a motion that that we are strongly supporting these sites to be put in, you know, wherever appropriate, and maybe less costly, and getting this information back to this Ivy Network so that this can happen, so that we don't lose the grant.
I should mention it would be a 10-year contract. And lastly, that the money that is charged to people, because the Ivy Network does the maintenance and software and so on, the money charged for the electricity used would come back to the township.
Yeah,
That money is kept by the township.
right.
We should let you have a say here, obviously.
Thank you. I'd like to suggest we don't make a motion right now. I suspect that this is one of those things that has fallen off the radar a bit. I remember it coming back to council saying that the 3 were going to be a different price than what we had originally anticipated. I had thought there had been a conversation about finding out whether we could drop to 2 as a starting point, because we've wanted, I know this is something council wanted to move forward on. What I don't know is what happened from there. I think it slipped off the radar somehow. I think that we definitely as a committee are probably going to want to recommend or encourage that council go forward, but I'd like it to come up into council and then us make the recommendation. Then it sounds like we're saying, hey, you need to get back at this. And maybe Emily could just find out for us whether it's at one of the coordinators or just, I'm not sure where it got dropped off the map. I feel like we saw at the end of last year that the money wasn't working, and then I've heard nothing more about it. But I know that we were planning to see that we could do something. So I would like us to hold off a month while we try and find out where it is in the process for the municipality itself. And then we can see whether recommending it with whatever their plan was to do works. I don't know if the rest of the committee is willing, but I think that might be a sensible approach. We may find out that it's actually in process and just hasn't been carried on. Because like I said, I remember the conversation about, oh, too expensive. Let's see what we can do instead because we want to keep doing this. And then I've heard nothing more.
Oh.
Faye, would you be comfortable with that?
Well, I just, I wish I could say yes, but, and maybe that's all I can do at this point. But when I first heard what Emily had to say about how it's too expensive and then it's at a standstill, that's kind of not acceptable to me as a ratepayer. When this is, I think this is a really important piece. And for all the reasons that everybody's given, you know, it tells the whole county where we're at in terms of this. And especially, I mean, when you talk about the, you know, the visitors and all of that. So I just find it frustrating when I hear, oh, it's too expensive and it's just sitting there, you know? So
The bottom line is you're free to make a motion and you're free to adapt your motion after what you've heard from Pat.
yeah,
That in fact, it may not have fallen, or the answer may not have been no. The answer may just be, oops, somebody has forgotten to move this thing forward. If you,
okay.
I don't like to play the role of Solomon here, but if I have to try and find a middle ground, I'd have to ask Pat, would you feel in any way disaffected if a motion that the committee encourages council to arrive at a resolution to its ongoing discussions regarding the placement of EV charging posts or charging stations at its earliest opportunity and report back on the status of any discussions by next month's meeting? Does that give you the?
I'm not going to support a motion on this at all.
Okay, okay. Then that,
Simply because I feel that between Emily and I, we can find out where that is at. If find out that somehow it got pushed aside with ever coming back to council, which makes no sense to me. But which is why I think it's fallen off the map. Council's already said, yes, we're interested in this. I don't think that it would just be taken completely off the table without it coming back to council in some form, which is why I want to give it a chance to get to council so we can figure out what it is, whether we want to encourage, we want to say, we're hoping we're moving on quickly. We want council to reconsider their decision. I feel like making a motion right now is premature. I think that a motion should be made one way or the other as soon as we have the information. So I'm not against the motion, I'm against the timing.
good, okay?
Okay, so I will withdraw my motion and instead I will suggest that we ask staff to report back to us at the next meeting the status of the Hamilton Township position in terms of applying for that grant, or that I guess grant is what you call it. So that they have to get back to us with an update. And then we'll know where it's at, I guess, and then we can make the motion.
Pat?
Okay, how about this? I will commit to finding out where we're at. I don't really want to put Emily in that position
Okay.
at this point. Again, I'm trying to be very aware of what Emily's job is. But for you to say to me as counselor, can you find out where we're at with this is totally why I'm on this committee. Does that work for you?
Perfect. So Faye, the minutes
Okay.
will record that undertaking and I think you will have every reason to believe you'll get exactly the same report you would have received from your motion. So.
Good, thank you.
And everybody's happy. Okay. All right. Next order of business is, in fact, the new business, the TD Environment Grant. And again, in this one, Madam Faye, your hands up.
Yeah, I am sorry to say this because I missed the first couple of minutes of the meeting, but under the business arising 7.1, did you go through what we had discussed at the 7.1?
You mean the first three recommendations?
Yeah, because
Yes. That's what I said. We reported back that they'd been presented to council, and the CAO is preparing a definitive response, and we can expect that shortly.
Okay, what we didn't discuss though is, for example, Judy, and I'm not sure if this is the meeting we do that, or if we do that separately, or we don't do it at all. But one of the things, Judy had sent us the material from Windsor, the Windsor document. And so, again, I'm not sure if staff looks at that or if.
Yep, so that was dealt with as well. That will be kept by them as a reference point as the township develops their own. Again, the CAO's response, the staff have as a resource, the information from other municipalities.
Okay, and then the other thing is that we as a group were going to put together a list of things that we thought it would be appropriate to sort of advertise or promote within the community. And we were all supposed to come up with that list. I think that was part of that, wasn't it? And we were going to be discussing that. And I sent a list out to everybody last week, and I didn't receive any other list. So again, I don't know. Do we put that, do we discuss that? You know, do we put that off to another meeting, or what do we do with that? I just don't want to lose sight with that, because that's one of the things that we were talking about.
Well, I'm looking at the 3 motions that were made pursuant to 7.1, and that's not one of them.
Let's see, where did I, sorry.
Uh,
Yeah, under the sort of.
Oh, sorry, a list of information to be shared with the public. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Yes.
I can't remember whether, Councillor McCourt, did you make specific references to that in your report? I don't think you did.
I did not.
That was
And
not strictly speaking.
I think that
Sorry, forgive me. Go ahead.
I was going to say, on the list I had, that wasn't specifically there. I remember us having a conversation, but don't recall where was it in the end. So I did not follow up on that.
So, okay, so just looking at the fact we have 4 minutes left, I think the short answer to your very good question, Faye, is that it will be postponed to the next meeting.
Okay.
But I think we have to reflect on the fact that we just had a discussion about posting on website versus Facebook. And I would suspect that some of the things we would have put in our summary would fall in the category of programs which might not be permanent, and therefore would raise the same concerns at the staff level. But let's have that discussion. So if you'd like to make a motion that or the results or further discussion on that motion take place at the next meeting, then that would certainly be in order.
Yes, so my motion is that the list of information to be shared with the public, that we discuss that, everybody, you know, brings their contribution to that, and we discuss that, and at the June meeting, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. So TD Friends of the Environment Foundation grant. Madam Deputy Clerk, can you help me out? Who asked to put that on the agenda? Oh, Pat, sorry. Yeah, Councilor McCourt.
That was me.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I think I don't remember why this was sent to me, like from what organization. It wasn't specifically TD. I got it through one of the other things that I belong to. But it says that municipalities can apply for this grant. And I didn't know if we wanted to consider, I think we've got till July 15th. I don't know how that sets us for time. A potential project that we might want to suggest to the municipality that we look into. And however, with 4 minutes, I don't think we're going to have a brilliant quick answer unless something's in someone's head.
Well, the deputy clerk and I had a discussion last week, and I asked that if there was anything that's already on council's and staff's wish list that maybe that would be the fastest starting point and the most logical. If you've already got some other ideas floating around for which getting a bit of a grant would facilitate or accelerate their coming to fruition, why reinvent the wheel? So I don't know whether it's appropriate to ask if perhaps in the next week or two, you could circulate to the committee members any ideas that the township already has. And in those same 2 weeks, depending on whether the answer is yes, we've got more than enough ideas to occupy the space in this grant, that committee members could also circulate their ideas. And then if you say July 15th, we will have another meeting in June, obviously, and we could consider and make any final recommendations based on.
Yeah, I just get worried about the timeline in terms of getting somebody actually, from what I hear, grant proposals, which I've never filled one out, but I hear that they are complicated. And I'm like, that's what I'm thinking. If we meet the end of June, we're only giving them 2 weeks to say where to go. I'm also thinking that I sit on Parks and Rec Advisory Committee as well. Maybe I'll talk to Trevor to see if there's anything specific to Parks and Rec that might be useful. I don't know if anybody, like I said, if anybody has an idea, feel free to send it to me and I'll see if I can follow up on our end. If there's something we can make use of, I'd like to see it happen.
Okay.
I think this is excellent, and if you could take it, Pat, to Parks and Rec. I'm looking at like community gardens, because I took a look at the application, what they do and what they don't do. Pollinator gardens, putting in, benches at some of these places. These grants are between 2,000 and 8,000 on a generally, and sometimes they could be even more. So community gardens, pollination gardens, benches, maybe if that could be added to some of the parks that we already have, or some of the, docks or whatever that we already have. I think that would be fantastic. And some signage, for pollinator gardens and that sort of thing. So that might be something. I mean, it's not hugely onerous, but it might be something Parks and Recs could do, a proposal, put a proposal together fairly quickly.
Okay, well, those are great ideas, Faye. Further to Councillor McCourt's suggestion, if anyone has any other thoughts, she has kindly offered to be the focal point. So rather than just generic circulation, let the minutes note that the councillor has expressed a willingness to be the focal point for consideration of any suggestions. And I'm sure we can come up with something, and township staff can come up with something that would allow us to avail ourselves of the generosity of Toronto Dominion Bank. And hopefully we would pass muster with them. And with that, there's only one other item on the agenda. I just wanted to ask your indulgence for a couple of seconds just to raise, we spend a lot of time talking about energy efficiency, and we should, and that aspect of the environment. I just wanted to put on the floor the ongoing availability of an extraordinarily generous tax credit program from the federal government called the EcoGift program that allows, I'll say homeowners, but it's larger property homeowners to get a tax credit for putting a conservation easement on their land. So I didn't want to go into a long story here, except to introduce the concept, if by any chance anyone wasn't aware of it. But basically what you do is you're making a commitment that even over and above the Oak Ridges Moraine or Greenbelt plan or the Places to Grow plan, you're extinguishing all development rights on your property. And the difference between what your property is worth as a developable property and what it's worth as just a house left behind forms the value tax credit. So we are talking in many cases hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax credits. What I would like to do is ask your consideration to invite the CEO of the Oak Ridges Moraine Land Trust to speak at a future meeting, and have 10 to 15 minutes to give a broader overview as one of the other things that we can be circulating to property owners in the community via our website or newsletter. Did you know that? So if that passes muster, or if anyone has any thoughts on whether that's consistent with our environmental agenda writ large. Shannon?
I think 100% yes, I love it. And when you said if they came and presented to us, I know these are recorded and these meetings can be shared publicly, but like excerpting their presentation if they agreed to it and having that as a standalone video on that we share too with people could be just another great, like, easy to do thing.
That's a great idea. And maybe that should be a template for all the presentations where the presenter is willing to be able to carve that off as its own YouTube video, or if Hamilton Township has a YouTube page, we can make a posting there, but that's a great idea. Thanks, Shannon. Any other, Faye?
I think it's a great idea too. The only thing I would suggest is that we kind of prioritize our list of our greenhouse
Sure.
gas emission recommendations, get that done, and then do this. I mean, I love this idea, but you know, we should prioritize what we got to do first.
100%. We've already, again, I don't think you joined us yet. We'd already said that we have discussed previously having some of the other department heads of the relevant departments of the township speak to us and have a chance to dialogue about their position. We've talked about the building permits earlier in this discussion, but the fleet management people and that sort of thing. So yes, they come first. Our recommendations come first. Those presenters come first. But then if there's something that you are comfortable with, obviously the land trust is a nonprofit. We're not talking any commercial benefit here. And then they take on the responsibility of the long-term stewardship for those lands to make sure that they stay as pristine as they were on the day the easement was put on there. So, okay, filed away for future reference. I think that's it. We've got a couple minutes over. My apologies, folks, but thank you very much for your ongoing attendance and participation. With that, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn. John, with the most eager hand up, seconded by Pat. We are adjourned. We look, I guess terrible chair. I should have said next meeting, June 28th at 10:30 a.m. So with that, we can cease the recording. Thank you all, and look forward to chatting with you again next month.
Bye.